Hey students, welcome to another screencast. Today's aim is Constitutional Compromises number 1, the Great Compromise. Before we begin, please have your Unit 2 vocab sheet open and handout 2.4 Constitutional Compromises. You're going to be taking notes in both of those documents as you watch this video, so please pause the video and take a minute to open both of them before you continue. And here are your objectives. Again, pause the video, look them over, get ready to copy some vocab and take some notes, and make sure that you have handout 2.4 open. In our last lesson, you learned about the Constitutional Convention, where delegates met to create a new constitution to replace the Articles of Confederation. Today, we will be looking at some of the disagreements that the delegates had as they tried to create this constitution and how they managed to overcome their differences and reach an agreement. In the spirit of democracy, the delegates at the Constitutional Convention decided that they would not adopt a new constitution unless at least 9 of the 13 states voted in favor of it. This process of voting to approve the Constitution is called ratification. Ratification was the goal of all the delegates at the convention, but it was unclear to them if it was actually going to happen because there were so many disagreements. The ratification was never a sure bet. Over the next few days, we'll be looking at 3 compromises that the delegates made in order to get the votes that they needed for ratification. A compromise is an agreement made when opposing sides accept changes to what they want. Imagine that you want to meet your friend at 6 to hang out, but your friend doesn't want to meet till 8. The two of you might compromise and meet at 7. So you each change the time that you really wanted in order to come to an agreement. Compromises always involve 2 sides that disagree on some issue but who make changes in order to agree. And the compromises made at the Constitutional Convention are important because they shaped the Constitution into the document that was eventually ratified. And that's the one that continues to be the framework of our government today. The first compromise we're going to discuss is called the Great Compromise. Please take a look at your handout. The issue that led to the Great Compromise was the representation of states in Congress. Take a moment to fill that in. You just learned about representation in class, and the important thing to remember here is that more votes in Congress means more power for each state. Under the Articles of Confederation, representation was equal. Equal representation means that every state has an equal number of representatives. Under the Articles, each state had 1 representative in Congress. The problem with equal representation is that it gives an advantage to states with smaller populations. These small states have fewer people that are being represented, but they get the same amount of voting power in Congress as states with a lot of people. They are, as a result, getting more representation than the people that live in the larger states. And more representation means more power. At the Constitutional Convention, a system of equal representation was proposed by the small states, led by the delegate from New Jersey. And this proposal became known as the New Jersey Plan. So our first group here is the small states led by New Jersey, and they wanted equal representation in Congress, with every state having the same number of representatives. But the New Jersey Plan was rejected by the delegate from Virginia, which was then the state with the largest population. The Virginia delegate, on behalf of the big states, instead proposed a plan for proportional representation. Proportional representation means that the number of representatives from each state is based on the state's total population. In other words, states with large populations would get more representatives in Congress than states with small populations. So our second group was the large states led by Virginia, and they wanted proportional representation. If you know something about Congress today, you might be able to guess how these 2 sides came to an agreement. The delegates agreed to create 2 different legislatures, a bicameral legislature. In one of the legislatures called the Senate, each state would get exactly 2 representatives. We call them senators. In the other legislature, which is called the House of Representatives, each state would get a different number of representatives based on their population. So New Jersey and Virginia each got 2 representatives in the Senate, which pleased the small states, like New Jersey. But Virginia got a lot more representatives in the House of Representatives than New Jersey did, which pleased Virginia and the other big states. And this was called the Great Compromise. The last question, how does a state know the size of its population? The answer is the census. So go back to your vocab sheet now. The census is an official count of the population taken every 10 years. Every 10 years, census workers go out, knock on doors, and gather information about how many people live in each part of the country. And that data is then used to determine the number of representatives each state gets in the House of Representatives. Big states get more representatives than the small states. Also, if a state's population increases, it gets more representatives, and if its population shrinks, it loses representatives. So the census is necessary for determining a state's representation in the House of Representatives because representation there is based on population. Remember, the census is only needed to determine representation in the House of Representatives. It does not apply to the Senate. All right, that's all for today's lesson. Pause the video, review the objectives, take notes on loose leaf so that you have a reference for the do now. And if you don't know the answer to any, just rewind the video and review. See you in class.